This week, Emmet interviews fellow Ireland native Debbie Jenkinson about her book Ghosting, winner of the 2020 Best Irish Comic of the Year award. They'll also talk about the Dublin comic scene, Debbie's next book, how being an outsider affects the art you produce, and more. First, if you appreciate the work we do on this podcast, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics.
Hello everyone, this is Emmet for Deconstructing Comics, and today I'm very excited to be talking to Debbie Jenkinson, a comic creator from Ireland, about her book Ghosting, which is the 2020 Best Irish Comic Award winner, and also is about my hometown. So I'm really excited to get into not only what happens in this book, but also what's happening back home. I need an update. Thanks for coming on the show, Debbie.
Thank you, Emmet. It's really exciting, and it's a bit of a thrill to be talking to someone so far away.
Yes.
From the internet.
Yes, and we're separated by an entire planet, but we get to talk about Dublin, which I'm happy about. But also, I'm still in sort of moderate lockdown on the other side of the world, so I haven't really got to talk to many people at all. So this is a thrill for me, twofold.
Yes, let's practice our social skills.
Yeah,
been a similar thing here.
How do I person again? And that's a weird thing as well, because I have a day job. I do this every day, talking to people in a camera every day, and it's so weird because then you have to be business person. Work person, you have to wear that hat. Just actually socially interacting with somebody, I'm very out of practice.
Anything could happen.
Well, it's funny because I'll just cut to the quick. I really loved your book. I really loved Ghosting, but
you.
One of the reasons why I enjoyed the experience of reading it was for half of the time I was reading, I did not know where this was going, and I was very afraid of what the possible was. There a twist in the tale? Was there something sinister approaching? The story concerns a bus errand driver called Steve. He's a lonely bachelor type. Again, alarms are ringing in my head immediately, and he believes he's been ghosted by an Italian tourist he believes, when we first meet her, her name is Monica, and it turns out something else is going on there. So he believes he's been ghosted, and his fellow driver, friend Dennis, who's from Kerry, which is the source of one of the biggest laugh I got from the book, is Dennis's essential Kerryness. Dennis says, "Oh, you've been ghosted. She dumped you. She's out of your life. You're hanging on for." So I was afraid that this was going to turn into a bleak story of obsession and stalking, and this poor woman was just trying to get away from him because he was weird or something like that, or maybe the version of events I was being presented with were false versions of events. He was obsessing on this passenger. I'm happy to report that's not the case. and if anything, it's a really sweet-natured and funny and beautiful book. So thank you very much for putting something like this out into the world.
Thank you, Emmet. That's so touching, and I'm so pleased that kind of atmosphere was created, because you don't know when you're creating it really how it's going to be received by someone, because you can't ever go into their shoes and see it as something that's unfolding, unless you've got a really poor memory. Like sometimes I look back at my books and I think, wow, what's going to happen here? I can't remember. But that's exactly what I wanted, is that it to be a real page turner and that you just don't know. And also that Steve is a very ordinary kind of person that hopefully we could all relate to in his daily life and the grind and all the kind of boring routine that he has to live. Like, I'm really interested in those kind of things that we see people out there in their workplace, like, and these are all things that we experience all the time. It's what life really is, isn't it? So yeah, thank you for that. And then so the routine is happening, the boredom, the occasional chaos, because you can imagine if you're working with the general public, you never quite know what's going to happen. So the idea that the fabric of society can kind of crack at any moment, and you can kind of see through, and everything can fall apart or not.
Yeah.
But I do want it to be hopeful. And I like books that have hope in them. I don't want to be, I don't want to finish a book and think, That's why that balance, I suppose, is really, I'm really, really glad that you enjoyed that balance and that the work.
And there's a lot of juxtaposition that enters the book, through your art as well, through how you, but also to the story. And because Steve is a bus errand driver, this is the bus routes that they go further than the Dublin bus. So they're the ones that travel across the country. So you have the contrast between the grey, desaturated, wet Dublin, cold, gloomy Dublin, and then you got these moments where he's on a country road and you just got these pops of green and orange and pristine blue, and I just love that you introduced that, and that's sort of this enlivening of Steve as well as the reader. When you're reading, you get to those passages, you this injection of nature sort of wakes you up again.
No, thank you. Yeah, I would always like to see the landscape as a character, I suppose. And I like that any Irish person knows about the contrast that we create, that we construct about the people from the country and the people from the city, and there's this whole divide, which is ridiculous. Small country, but there's always that kind of pull between those two things, and that's why I like the fact that he kind of takes a dip into the natural world, and that there's this idea of the countryside, but with this big motorway going down it, so it's this kind of man versus nature thing. I suppose they're just interesting things that I experience. I used to get that bus up and down to see my mother all the time. So it's very familiar to me, And then during lockdown, it was really a pleasure to be able to draw those scenes, because I wasn't, at one stage we were restricted to 2 kilometer radius.
Yeah.
And and so I would go out, I'd beetle out to my shed in the morning and spend a couple of hours. I try to do a page or 2 every day, and I'd be just scribbling away. And it'd be such a relief from feeling so restricted, that at least in your mind you could really fly over those landscapes. And just using Google Map, kind of, it's almost as it was the next best thing to traveling, really.
Yeah. And that's a feature of your book as well, the aerial view you keep introducing, the sort of God's eye view almost.
Thanks to our overlords at Google. And drone photography has been amazing, actually, for reference, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you ever look at? I think they're amazing.
There's an Australian film I'd recommend to you. I got to interview the director a few years ago. It's Mystery Road, by Ivan Sen, and it's a Indigenous Australian Western. So it's this Indigenous Australian cop in a small town. He's basically the sheriff, and he's investigating crime. But there's these sequences in the movie where the camera observes the ground below from a height. And you can see there's all these sort of trails that walk through the grass and the bush. And Sen talked about that, and he was saying that this is a lot of Aboriginal art takes this sort of aesthetic, this approach to depicting a landscape. And it's because they're imagining not their perspective, they're imagining the perspective of something above them. So the gods, they literally, they think of more than themselves when they use perspective. It's not the individual's perspective, it's the It's the country's perspective.
Yeah.
So I was actually thinking about that a bit when I was reading your comic, because I was going, oh, I know, and I think it speaks to an understanding of the Irish countryside as well in relation to the city, that use contrasts, because I'm looking at the cover of your book, and I was staring at it when I first bought it, and I was going, oh, that's O'Connell Street. And I was picking that up from little things from my memory of O'Connell Street. But like it has both an architectural style to it, in terms of how you've laid it out, but also this sense of this lived in space, this urban lived in space. And then you contrast that with the countryside too. That's one of the things I really enjoyed about this.
Oh, thank you. I love the idea. I think when I was working in animation, my boss used to talk about the overhead shot as giving a sense of surveillance as well. So in movies where you see characters from above, maybe, and you see how small they are as well, it gives you a sense of what I was thinking really is that we see this huge place and these little tiny ant-like characters. But the book could be about any one of them. You know what I mean? It could be about any bus. It could be about any person in any car. And I like that idea, is that we're all kind of living out our own stories, and everybody has a story to tell. And you don't have to be, a Hollywood movie star. You know what I mean? To be worthy of that, I think.
It emphasizes Steve's loneliness as well, and his vulnerability, which is
and how tiny we all are. Insignificant. But I like that. I love the idea of the Aboriginal view of this. This kind of universal view, and this sense that they're only part of a huge, picture.
Not to distract us from the topic at hand, but that's just what it reminded me of. I just made that connection. So
no, I love it.
If you check it out, it's a great film. For those listening, Debbie alluded to the idea of because we're both Dubliners, right? You're Dubliner.
Yes.
Yeah. So this idea of a divide with the country. When we started this conversation, Debbie showed me outside her window. There's sheep outside, and I was going, I very rarely saw sheep when I lived in Dublin, and it's half an hour away. It's not that far.
I know.
You stay
very far away. Really.
You stay exactly 3 hours. You're across the country.
Yeah.
And
that's with really bad roads.
Yeah.
It's only half an hour as the crow flies. I know that's a big exaggeration, but yeah. I know we've lost a bit the contact with that countryside, even though it really is on our doorstep, no matter where you are in Ireland.
That's it. And the idea of Dennis, the character of Dennis, this Kerryman, as I said, and he keeps talking about Kerry. And it's so funny because then Steve hits him with are you going back? Are you going to go back there and actually go to these places you keep talking about? I know.
I've been there for 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, that may or may not have been inspired by my husband, who's from Carsaldine.
Oh, right.
And he does talk about Kerry. He may mention it occasionally.
Is he a Top Gun fan as well?
No, that's gosh, I don't know where I got that. I just like the idea of this very kind of posy guy, who thinks he's God's gift to women, and he's just very confident. I suppose in a way he's the anti-Steve, as poor Steve is racked with guilt and doubts and existential angst, and I suppose we all know. Those of us who are more Steve-like always seem to work with some very confident and person who knows how to do life,
Yeah, and it's just insufferable.
Just having too much fun.
Yeah. But like you just mentioned it, but yes, it's a laugh out loud. It's one of the funniest moments in the book.
Thank you.
When he's talking about Kerry and his memories of Kerry, and then he refuses to go back there. But it's also one of the most, again, it's one of the most beautiful moments of the book, because you actually see his memories. You see his vision of Kerry, and it's stunning. Yeah,
that's the beauty of comics, isn't it? You can bring in Like that would be so hard to do in a novel. And of course, they both have their strengths. Like I think novels are really good for interior narratives and point of view. But there's nothing like a comic for introducing an image from somebody's mind and then putting other text beside it. It just has that magic kind of power, when you put that text beside that image, and the way you can refer to different times as well.
Yeah.
It's just so poetic in that way, I think comics. Yeah.
It's the use of association. You can skip and jump from image to image to image, and the reader will follow you along. Like it makes sense. It's just laid out for you.
And so that works in time as well. But those images are so easily understood, I think, as opposed to paragraphs of description. Do you know what I mean? Which your brain takes in a different way, I think, and has to kind of interpret and filter. Whereas an image is just like subconsciously. Right. I don't know. It's very intuitively understood by our brains, and that's why I think that it's very kind of intimate in a way. Yeah. I mean, they all have their power, don't they? All the different types of art. Like music is really about big emotions. But comics has that particular intimacy between you and the reader, and you can imagine the reader it's very private, and the way they just have that. When you meet people who've liked your book, you have that connection with them, which is lovely, which makes it worthwhile.
I think it speaks to your style as well, your own art style too, because it's suggestive of memory and emotion. Because the book features, as I mentioned before, like these pops of color, but also washout effect too at times, particularly in the Dublin sequences. But is it mostly pencil you're using, or?
Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah.
The previous book I did was made with black and white ink with some color in between, but it was just I have a child now and I don't have time to be painting things and waiting for them to dry. So I really like that, and just that you can get in there and have a good scribble, And there's something appealing about the way if we draw quickly, it's very expressive for some reason.
Yes.
Even though it's totally imperfect. But you hope that even those rough, textured images will still draw the reader in. If you have a very kind of strong story pulling them through. So there's a kind of a deceptive thing about that, but maybe it doesn't look like it's been thought out. In a way, you don't even want the reader to think it's been thought out. It should look like, well, what I was hoping it would look like would be like just a scribbled diary. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it has that kind of unfiltered kind of stream of consciousness stuff about it. So you just kind of keep going. And it's something I'm kind of, I always have to fight with at the beginning of a book, because the one I'm doing now, I want to make it all look so pretty, so everybody will be impressed and think I'm really good at drawing. But in reality, it's much better when you get into it and just let it happen and do it fast. Otherwise, you get really tight and kind of ego-driven or something. So I always struggle with that at the beginning of a book, and then I get into it. I think, let's just get this done.
Yeah.
Let's not worry about making it perfect.
But that's great, because that gives the book an energy. As you say, it carries the reader along.
It's kind of vulnerable as well, I think. You're letting them see your process. It's not like, it's like inviting somebody into your house. It's not very tidy, but they can kind of see who you are. Yeah. More than if it's all pretty and shiny.
Yeah, there's a bit of a Pittsburgh scene at the moment where they are like Frank Santoro and the like, where they're he produced a book called Pittsburgh, which I've recently read and loved, but he's literally drawing with crayon and butcher's paper. and the printed book has the warp and weave of the butcher's paper on the page. You can actually see the
nice.
wrinkles that
Yeah,
it's being
nice.
pressed into a scanner or something.
Yeah.
And again, it maybe is deceptively simple, but the emotional impact of that book, Pittsburgh, it just hit me. Like I just got completely swept up in it.
Wow.
Emile Ferris is another example. I don't believe she's Pittsburgh, but like my favorite thing is Monsters. That again is a child in her copybook drawing monsters. And then as the story becomes more, as you said, engaging, all of a sudden complexity enters into it. But it's still the same simple style. And I would place you in that set because you're doing the same thing. You're plugging me into something quite simple. At first, it seems quite simple. And then I tune into it. And then the story catches me. And then I follow through. And I just, I think it's a really great approach.
Well, that's very encouraging because that's all you want really when you're making them. You just want someone to read them and get carried along.
Yeah. No, it's great. And maybe people feel I'm talking around the book quite a bit, and I am, because I don't want to spoil the surprises. So I don't want to do that. I have one last comment on it. I will say that the scene of Steve having a cappuccino for the first time was, again, hilarious, and I immediately related to it because I didn't have cappuccinos until I came to this country, where they invented cappuccino, apparently.
That's so funny.
They invented good coffee in Australia, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I love that moment. That was just laugh out loud funny too.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had something experienced because I lived in Italy for a few years as well. So I was very, that's all drawn from real life, of course. Yeah.
Did you check out comic books in Italy while you were there? Like any of the Italian?
Not really, because it wasn't a thing in my life in the same way as it is now. I was just a student. And it took me a long time to kind of switch on my brain, I don't know. I was a bit of an amoeba. I think it took me a while to kind of grow up. But no, I think I used to read Dylan Dog. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's just the kind of...
I've got the big, thick volume of it just inside.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I've got a couple of Dylan Dog. I love Dylan Dog. In fact... and maybe I shouldn't. I will. I was just explaining to somebody we've done a book and we've used an actual person, a living person in this book, and we had a legal review, and the lawyer said, "Oh well, this is defamatory. So you can't do that." Yeah, and I thought of Dylan Dog because of Groucho Marx is in Dylan Dog. He's Dylan's assistant. He looks it's Groucho Marx, and then when they translated it into English, the estate apparently threatened them, so they just took off his mustache and called him, I think he's called Felix in English. I was going, why don't we put a Groucho Marx face on this guy? It's clearly him. He's got Groucho Marx face.
Oh, that's so clever. I love it. I love all the layers of associations and references.
Yeah, we might get away with that. I don't want to legal.
What is it you're making just now?
I'm working on a script with an artist called Lenore Avery, and it's set in Sydney in the 1980s, and this is where the real people come into it. And it's loosely inspired by an Australian comic book called The Shadow. So the Australians had their own version of The Shadow, and I discovered that the artist who worked on that comic shares a name with an English poet from the Elizabethan era who wrote a poem called The Shadow of Night.
Oh, wow.
So he belonged to the night school, and he was big into this idea of night as a time of reflection and freedom, and the day was when oppression comes in and all that. So I thought, well, what if I take those two things and I marry them into the one thing? So that's...
Oh, wow.
So, you mentioned poetry before, I'm sort of introducing poetry into this narrative, and reflecting on Australia and the Englishness of Australia and how it sort of intrudes upon the country itself.
Oh, wow. That sounds brilliant. That sounds really interesting, Emmet. Yeah.
We'll see where we get to with it.
Are you still at the writing stage?
We've got some pages laid out. We've got some sample pages. I can send you some examples of what we've done. And now we're looking for funding so my artists can get paid. Because that's the plan.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Coming up, discussion of the Dublin comic scene, Debbie's next book, and more. Don't forget you can help to unlock classic early episodes of Deconstructing Comics, help me return all the old episodes to this podcast feed, get videos of my brother Paul and me discussing 20th century TV trivia, and at the $4 level, get access to hours of additional full-length podcasts. At the $10 level, you can review the book of your choice with me here on this show. Support Deconstructing Comics and our other shows at patreon.com/deconcomics. Or you can send a one-time donation via PayPal to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
But yeah, that sort of leads me to the next point, which is that I was like yourself. I think I was also an amoeba. I was sort of, or I was maybe in my little cocoon until I got out of Ireland and encountered a scene.
That tends to be a bit of a wake up, doesn't it?
Yeah. A shock to the system is what you need. And I knew comics. I liked comics, and I introduced myself to comics people, and as a result, got into comics and making comics. But you were part of the comic scene in Dublin and Ireland, and that's the scene I didn't have.
Yes. Yeah, what happened was I think I met Sarah Bowie, who makes comics and also does a lot of workshops online if anybody wants to join them. Really good. And she does observational comics that are just brilliant observations of people she just sees and kind of eavesdrops on buses and things like that. Anyway, I met her in the Comic Jam one night up in the Lord Edward.
Yes. And
after that, and then she and Paddy Lynch and I started this thing called the Comics Lab. And we met loads of people kind of emerged from the wallpaper. And we ran it for a couple of years. And it was really cool. We used to have little kind of drawing exercises, things just for gas. And then we'd have a couple of speakers, and we made a few anthologies and things like that. And then we met Matt Mellis, who had just arrived with his family. And he started Decaf. Which you probably haven't seen it because you've been away for a few years.
I've been to it, but I've heard of it. I've heard of it as it's emerged, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's been a great central point for everything that's going on with comics in Dublin. And it was quarterly until the pandemic. So that was really a way of generating work from people, and really has revitalized that whole scene. I think it's been really excellent in that way. And then now he's also opened his own comic shop up in Phibsborough.
Oh, is this Little Deer?
This is the guy this is Little Deer.
Oh, wow.
So so it's amazing that just with just with that kind of hub happening, how things spin off out of it. And everybody kind of has a go. We were doing live readings as well. And those work really well. Actually, I think Pat Grant was one of the first people I saw doing a live reading, and his was amazing.
Yeah, just again for the benefit of the listener, we had a quick chat beforehand. We had some common points, and Pat Grant is one of those, and he's an Australian comic creator. He did Blue, and his latest one's called The Grot, is it, or Grot?
I'm not up on the latest one. I'm trying to think of the name of the one that is it called Blue?
Blue was the first one, the surfer setting, and then you got the blue people, and they're being mistreated by the community. Yeah,
I love his work. It's so well thought out. I love the style of it, and I love that he's so honest about how hard it is to read. Like he said that the drawing part is really hard, and I think he likes the inking and all that. But anyway, he's a real perfectionist. And I love the one, I can't think of the name of it, but there was one about his father.
Turmina Video?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story.
Brilliant. Yeah. So well done.
We've got a Pat Grant hanging in this house somewhere as well, because he drew a picture of Thurl, which is near where my wife is from. So and the sort of pool there by the sea. So that's hanging in our house, because it's just a beautiful snapshot of that place. It's a litany again.
Yes.
Captures the life.
Good. And his style is so unique. It's really like looking through his eyes at the world when you look at his work, which is, I think, is one of the beautiful things about comics. You feel like it's the world filtered through somebody else's imagination.
But that speaks
so uniquely personal to them.
That's exactly what I was just going to say, because I think that's where you were getting to with the live comics readings, because it's not just someone delivering a reading where they're using their words and the way their intonations come through all of a sudden as you're watching them. But when you're doing a comics live reading, you start to understand their choice of imagery as well. Like that, you start to see the world as they see it, which goes back to your point about, prose versus comics. There are some hidden depths with prose that comics just lay you out for you.
Yeah. It's such a unique experience. You can really sink into a comic book. I mean, I think that's why the people who like them, which isn't everybody, really like them. You know what I mean? It's one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah. Comics isn't just about reading, the act of reading comics. Certainly within my lifetime, it's become the act of amassing comics, like collecting comics, like having a comics shelf. You can't just, like, I within living memory, I could still recall you would buy a comic and you'd read it to death, and then it was in the garbage. And I'm probably upsetting some people right now listening, because you threw away Amazing Spider-Man.
You monster.
Yes. But that's what you did. You read it and you read it and you read it, and maybe you lent it to somebody, and maybe they spilt something on it, and maybe
well, they just didn't stand up too much because they were soft, weren't they?
Yeah, that's it.
So,
particularly the UK reprints as well, which again probably wouldn't be worth as much as the American editions, but like, they just came apart. Like the pages, just the staples just came out and the pages fell out.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm really excited about the Dublin scene that you've described, because if I knew anybody who wanted to do comics, they were working on their portfolio to maybe get seen by 2000 AD, or maybe someone from Marvel would come to a thing and they'd show it to somebody from Marvel. Like we were cut off.
Hard.
Yeah.
And that's very technical and really demanding the style that they're looking for.
Yeah.
But with decaf, there's always a way of starting the tables we keep really affordable, so anyone can kind of jump in there and have a go. They're quarterly, so you have a few months to make something for the next one if you like. And we do anthologies sometimes. We had with the Irish Times, we did this graphic short competition, and that was a great way of generating work as well. So those are all things that Yeah, just encourage people and give them an outlet, really. Yes, so I can't wait to get back to that now. I don't know if we're going to be able to do one at Christmas because things aren't so great at the moment here, COVID-wise.
Yeah.
But I hope that we will. Maybe we'll do an outdoor thing next year or something. We'll figure something out anyway. And in the meantime, there's a Matt's shop, and yes, and so people can sell their work out of there as well, which is really good.
What was his full name? It was Matt.
Oh, Matt Mellis.
Matt Mellis.
Yeah. Melis. Yeah.
Well, if you listen to this episode, Matt, thank you so much, because the package you sent me made it all the way to the side of the world, and I enjoyed some Irish comics, and I loved it. Thank you very much, Matt. Little Deer Comics in Phibsborough.
That's right.
That's North Dublin. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, you teased what your next work would be. Do you want to talk quickly about that at all, or are you happy to give that a shout out?
Yeah, thank you. It's about a pharmacist called Ronnie Fox, who is a transplant. So I'm really interested in this idea of being a blow-in in Ireland, because it's a great country, and I think we're probably getting over this kind of stuff. But there is a big thing about being an outsider, and you have this idea that you have to kind of trace your ancestors back to Brian Boru, or and that you have to feel that you really belong in a town, especially I think in rural Ireland, because most Dubliners haven't been there that long, their families. But this is something that we really need to challenge in the modern day. Come on now. We don't have this. We don't police what it means to be Irish anymore. We need to. There's lots of new Irish people. Anyway, don't have a bee in my bonnet about that at all, as you can see. But this is what Ronnie is dealing with. Her mother has transplanted them to live in Mullingar, even though they're from Dublin. And then her mother dies. She has dementia and she dies. And Ronnie's left there working as a pharmacist. And the interesting thing about being pharmacists is that one thing is that pharmacists are very intelligent people, but they do jobs in rural towns that maybe don't stretch their intellect. And they also know a lot about the town. If you think about everything, they know exactly how everybody is. And this particular town is more or less owned by the Duffy family. So I don't know if I should tell you too much more, but it's about how she discovers that she belongs there more than she thinks she does, really. So it's about her. It's about sort of a mystery that occurs when her mother dies. She works out that she wasn't born, or her parents weren't married the year that she thought they were, and she figures out a few little things, and then she does a DNA test, and yes, that's about it.
Okay, another mystery. So yes,
yes, I love it. I love a mystery. I'm glad to say this one is not a romantic mystery. The last two were kind of had a bit of romance in them, but this one does not. So.
Okay.
I like the idea of this kind of unusual heroine.
Yeah,
she's kind of magnificent, even though she's not what we think of as a hero type. She's just somebody who does a really good job and tries her best, and she's got a lot of guts, and she's honest and kind and all these things, but she's ordinary as well as that. Do you know what I mean? So I like the idea of that and celebrating that type of person as well. So I'm at the moment I'm trying to get some interviews with pharmacists.
Yeah, okay.
Give me some inside information, and also I want to talk to. I need a sensitivity editor for my other character, who's an Indian woman who is working with Ronnie in the pharmacy. Okay. So it's a bit about their friendship. It's more of a friendship story really than romance.
Yeah. It's It's funny. I mean, again, you got that notion of intimacy because the pharmacist, as you say, knows everything and knows because they know all their problems. Like they know all the issues that are, they need help with. And
yeah. And everybody who works in the pharmacy probably knows a lot about it too. Yeah. It's they've got that kind of particular insight into the community, and they're kind of everyday heroes, really, I suppose.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a quick story. I visited a pharmacy in Limerick City with my late father about 20 years ago, and there was this young woman there, and she was Asian, and unfortunately my dad was of a certain generation, and he's like, "Gosh, your English is very good." And I just my dad, unfortunately, I was mortified. I was scarlet.
Oh, God help you! I know. It's not a comfortable moment. Yeah, so this is something I want to get into, but I want to be really careful and not kind of, I just want to represent that reality in a way that's honest and realistic as well. I want to know what it's like to be an Indian woman working in a small town in Ireland. And so I really need some help with that because it's just so far from my own experience.
Yeah.
Even though I have been an immigrant in different countries, but as a fancy white lady, it's not that hard. And English speaking and all that. So, and I have a lot of privilege. So I need to get that on, get that point of view. But I'm really interested in that because talk about blowing, I really, the idea that people won't acknowledge you, won't let you feel like you're at home or anything like that, and how that plays out for people and how in the end they can just maybe figure out some way of feeling at home. Yeah, because I like to be a bit hopeful at the end.
Yeah. But
how about you in Australia? Do you feel like a blow-in?
Absolutely.
Even though your partner is Australian.
Yeah, my partner is Australian, and she started picking up little things I say.
Oh, good.
She'll say, right too. She'll say, "You're a man" or "You're one."
Good. Keep it up.
So there's a bit of a bleed over now. But yeah, I'll always be. I'm Australian. I'm an Australian citizen.
Right.
But I'll always be, a stranger. And I've noticed this when I speak to someone, I may be speaking perfectly clearly, but I sound different. And that difference takes a moment to work its way through the person.
Yes.
It's not what I'm saying is confusing. That's not it. They are revising their impressions.
Yes.
They're going, okay, he's from somewhere else. Okay, I'm trying to where's that?
Pigeonhole? Yeah. Where's the pigeonhole I put him in?
yeah, exactly. And that actually creates confusion because then they miss things I've said. There's like a delay. There's a comprehension delay.
I used to have the same in the States.
Yeah.
And there'd be this pause and then, are you foreign? Yeah. Anyway, I was asking for the direction, you know what I mean? So, yes. Yeah.
I had an encounter with a Texan gentleman while waiting tables in Edinburgh years ago, and he was asking me about my accent, and I was, I'm from Ireland, I'm from Dublin, and he's going, "Oh, what a strange accent," and I was going, "Well, your accent's pretty strange," and he said, "I don't have an accent." It's, "You absolutely do."
Your accent's pretty strange too.
One of the broadest accents there is.
But I think, I know. Oh, I did, yeah. And it's crazy the way we all think we're the normal,
Yeah, that's it. That's
exactly the default.
Yeah. My perspective is the normal perspective.
Yeah, we all have to work out against that, don't we?
But that's why, I mean, you sort of mentioning the sensitivity reader. I'm so happy to hear you say that, because that's the point of that. And that sharing of a perspective that can not only give you insights but challenge your sense of what that character would be doing or saying or thinking in that situation.
That's what I want.
Hmm.
That's what I want. And that's what, I think that'll be really good.
Hmm.
And also, I think the idea of being an outsider, just from your own point of view in Australia, is very good for an artist to take the role of us. I know it's a bit tiring sometimes. You think, I have to explain where I'm from again. And, maybe not feeling totally accepted, but not by everyone. I'm sure that there are plenty who do. But I think that's an interesting point of view to inhabit as an artist. It's motivating, Yeah, that filters through to your work, does it?
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, doesn't that then further inspire the need to communicate?
Yeah.
The need to be understood.
Yeah, and to have a voice.
Yeah.
And that if you're a quiet arty type, an introvert who likes to stay at home in their shed scribbling away, that part of the urge to make work is to tell your story and be heard, and also have the last word sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's very therapeutic. That's why I was thinking. I mean, I'd make these books even if nobody would ever read them, because just making them has been really good. It's really really useful.
I love that.
You're recreating the world the way you want, and you're playing God a bit with the characters,
Yeah.
So that's a bit the idea of looking over this landscape and moving them around, moving around your little pawns and seeing what happens with them.
Yes, but then you've made a thing and then you put it out into the world and it exists. It's a thing.
It's amazing, yes.
Yeah.
But it's only a thing if somebody else looks at it and takes, and will give it the time to read it. It's kind of that magic, isn't it?
I don't know. I think once it's an object or a file or it's completed. Yes. So it has a beginning, middle, and end. I go, right, that's out there. That exists now. Maybe one other person will read it.
Yeah.
Maybe no other person will enjoy it.
Hopefully more than one.
But it's out there. You did a thing.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
I think that's...
You learned a lot from it, probably.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's immensely important. And where I get upset with people sometimes is because I feel the motivation isn't to create a thing. The motivation is to be famous or to be associated with something, or to
but that's not going to work. That won't work. Or if it does work, it won't make you happy. It's not.
Yes.
It's not what you think. It's not going to fix you in the way that you think that it might. It won't make people love you. I mean, people don't love you because you're really good at drawing. You know what I mean? They love you because they like you because you're a flawed person. That they can relate to, and you have vulnerabilities. I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of confusion about fame, isn't there, in our culture, and celebrity and what it might do for you or not.
Yeah, and the same thing applies to a work. Not everyone has to like it.
No, they won't.
Yeah, but like the idea that everyone has to be entertained by this. Well, no, maybe they shouldn't be. Maybe it should inspire different reactions, and some of those reactions may be extreme, or some of the reactions may be just like, oh, no, it wasn't for me. But that's fine. Yeah. That's you as a person.
That's good. Yeah. I'd rather have that than have blah reactions.
Yeah.
Blah is what you don't want. It didn't make me feel anything, and it was grand. You know what I mean? This is not what I'm looking for. I was just going to recount this. I think I heard someone say that Prince, talking about fame, said that he said, I've been to somebody was trying to get him to do more work. You know, the way he became a kind of recluse, and they were trying to get him to do more songs or something. He said, I've been to the top of the mountain and there is nothing there. So, I mean, I just don't, I just think it's a good way to think about fame. And I mean, he was enormously famous, but it didn't fulfill him. So we have to find other motivation for doing our work. And
it's beautiful. It's really nice way to put it.
There's nothing up there. Let's not even go up the mountain.
Go up the mountain because you want to go up the mountain, not because there's something up there.
Yeah. But just don't expect it to transform your life. I think that's the thing. You know what I mean? Like the message, a lot of the messages we get from society is if you do this and this, you will, if you get this kind of a job and get married to the right kind of person, you will be somehow transformed. No, you'll still be you. Wherever you go, there you are. So.
Feck it! Here comes another anecdote. I remember feeling immense religious guilt as a kid for climbing Croagh Patrick and just having a lot of fun doing it. But then there were people brought down. I remember witnessing somebody being brought down and their feet were cut to ribbons, because the people did that thing where they climbed it barefoot as a form of pilgrimage. And for people listening who don't know, Croagh Patrick is a mountain in Ireland, and it's in, I want to say, Mayo? Is it Mayo or Sligo?
I think it's Mayo, yeah.
Mayo. And it's a religious site of pilgrimage because St. Patrick is believed to have climbed the mountain and founded a church there. So people climb it barefoot as a form of penance, I don't know. And I remember that sense of horror when I saw that. But then I went scrambling up the mountain. I just had a great time. Loved it. I got to the top, got to see the view. Beautiful.
Yeah. Why would you? Yeah. Well, why is that not? It's just as good as going up with your bare feet. Yeah.
I mean, I guess for me the issue was they were doing it for the suffering, but not because they enjoyed suffering.
Right.
I hope that maybe they did, but I think for the projected self-worth, the martyrdom of it, and that's when you get into sort of complex ideas as to that's similar to the desire for fame almost, because it's like you've made your suffering an offering to some divine entity, and I just that's where I get creeped out, because I'm going, well, then you're not actually in this moment right now, are you? You're just thinking of your own body is becoming separate to you.
Yeah. You're just banking it.
That's
in a way. And I just feel like surely there's something more useful you could do, like just pick up some rubbish on the beach or something.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, make the world a beautiful place.
Anyway, I don't expect to see you up in Croagh Patrick anytime soon.
No, I don't think I can make it. Jesus, with my knees, are you kidding me? For folks listening, where can they find you? Where should they look for Debbie Jenkinson?
Well, I have a website, debbiejinkinson.net, and I am also on the Twits at Debbie Jenkinson, and I am on Instagram at Jenkinson.Debbie. I think it is. Yeah, I think it's that. So yeah, I would love to see anyone there, and if they have any questions or if they want to meet people or whatever, when we're doing more meetups and stuff like that, it would be nice to to see people.
Yeah, great stuff. And if ever I do cross the world again, I'd love to attend and see what the folks back home are getting up to.
Of course, you're coming back.
Have to. Have to. It's like the salmon returning to the spawning grounds. You have to come back.
It's like the boomerang.
Debbie Jenkinson's Ghosting is published by Silver Lining. You can help Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and all our podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Next week, Kumar and Jordan discuss the 1984 Marvel Comics adaptation of David Lynch's film of Frank Herbert's novel, Dune, and the 1992 adaptation of the film Bram Stoker's Dracula. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.